We're going to spend a second and ask you to grab a piece of paper. Got it? Pause. Got your paper and pen? All right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down what your non-negotiable movements are. So if you had a signature set of movements, what are they? What does that mean? What does that look like? What is the thing you're coming back to over and over again? So when we ask organizations and coaching groups to ask what are their non-negotiables, what are their foundational movements, we can then begin to have the next conversation. So when we're looking at programming as a whole, one of the things that we're trying to do as we take this from exercising, where I'm just doing elliptical and bicep curl, and I'm trying to create a modern movement practice, a skilled conditioning, sort of skilled practice, it means that I am responsible for at least touching some of the shapes that I'm gonna need to be in the warm-up, in the actual movements that I'm doing, in the accessory work that I'm doing, in the conditioned accessory work, right? The metabolic accessory work. I'm doing push-ups and pull-ups while I'm breathing hard in a couplet or triplet. That would be an example. But what we often see is that if you nail down, what you'll begin to ask yourself is, in that core value, those core movements that you're doing, do you have movement holes? Now, an easy way to think about this sometimes is a lot of coaches go for a push and a pull, right? In all three planes. Well, we can be a little bit more sophisticated about it in terms of our movement now. The real idea is, hey, am I taking my shoulders, for example, and exposing those shoulders to all the things that a shoulder needs to do? In the formal language of strength and conditioning, of sort of calisthenics and barbell dumbbell training, it's easy to get chased down the rabbit hole of so many tools, so many opportunities to play and express different ways to challenge. But if you say to me, for example, in my skilled conditioning adult class, believe that everyone needs to be able to do a pull-up. I don't care who you are, we're gonna be working on hanging from a bar. And we do that for shoulder health, we do that for spine, we do that for breathing, we do it for shoulder pain, whatever. I also think it's badass when everyone can do one pull-up. So one of my non-negotiables, and something that shows up a lot for me, is I do a lot of strict pull-ups during the week. So if we get to the bottom of what that is, you're saying, hey, I'm going from an overhead position to this kind of front rack position. That is a position I spend time in. I also press a lot overhead. I think that is a movement that really helps me feel integrated and connected. So I can unequivocally say there's a swing, there's a overhead position, right? I like to deadlift as sort of some of my core movements. Now, it's not that that's the standalone, but it helps me to conceptualize some of the other accessory movements that I'm in there. So for example, if I just squatted and deadlifted and benched and pressed overhead, I'm not taping my hip into extension in any of those movements. So I may need to do some elevated split squats or some lunging style shapes or some deadlifts in a split position. So if I'm just using those basic barbell methods as training, then I need to take my accessory work and make sure that at least it's not just about getting a muscle pump or tendon health. It's also about exposing my tissues to the ranges they need to be in, which is not an accident that our Olympic lifters end up doing a lot of accessory work that, for example, our Olympic lifters bench. And the reason they would bench is that in the sort of pantheon of movements around Olympic lifting, we see that there's no shoulder ever taken into extension. So they do a lot of pulls, right? So that bent over row that we always see the Chinese lifters doing, for example, is such an easy way of exposing that shoulder to some shoulder extension. But then floor presses, bench presses is a way of pushing and adding control through either distraction or through approximation, a push or a pull to that shoulder position. So what's interesting then, or what's notable, is that you can basically drop into anyone's program, whether it's Strong First or you're using CrossFit or Olympic lifting. You can basically start to see what are the core values, what are the core movements and positions, and then which positions of the hip, which positions of the shoulder. Do we never take the torso into flexion and extension? That's going to be a problem. Do you not see any rotation in the program? That's going to be a problem. But it's easy for you to look down and say, these are the things that I get the most bang for the buck out of. then my accessory work, I can build around that, whether that's conditioning or back off sets or some kind of play or whatever it is. And it begins to then be a lot easier to understand what it is you're trying to program. And you end up removing the barbell, dumbbell, kettlebell idea, and now you can sort of simplify what it is that's important and then what you need to do to support those things. Hopefully that helps how you're thinking about the whole.